everyone. And no better way to end it than my fabulous panel going to be talking about happiness and happy people. So we're a great hour. So some housekeeping as usual. Thank you to our sponsors, Hayes Parsons and Day One sponsors Nico Measurement and Control. I heard behind me before the last session that hashtag AIM Conference 2022 is trending, so let's keep that going. And it's my great pleasure to introduce a fabulous panel this afternoon. 4 organisations going to talk about happy people across their museums. So we have Wendy Wilshere, Volunteer Coordinator, and Celyn Gurden-Williams, Head of People Development at Beamish. They're going to be talking about volunteers. Victoria Reeves, who is Chief Executive of the National Justice Museum, is going to be talking about staff. Gareth Redston, Chief Executive of Manchester Jewish Museum, who's going to be talking about keeping his board happy. And Morrigan Mason, Museums Development, Carmarthenshire, who's going to be talking about happiness among readers. As ever, each panellist is going to talk for a few minutes. I have a question to pose at the end, and then we'll open it to the floor. I'm sure people are conscious about travel, getting to hotels and coaches and things, and there's also the AGM to follow, so we're going to crash on through. We've done it in 50 minutes, so stick with and enjoy. Thanks.
Hello everyone. Can everyone hear me? Yeah? Quick show of hands. How many of you guys have been to Beamish Museum before? Oh, that is fabulous! Oh, that is amazing. If you haven't put your hand up, please do put us on your list, because we've all got lists, haven't we, of where we want to go next, so please do put us on your list. For those of you who maybe are not familiar with Beamish Museum, we're a wonderful 300-acre site, and we have around about 380 staff working with us, and about 400 and counting volunteers working with us. And what I always say is, with great people comes great responsibility. And we as a museum are a very happy place, I feel. We decided that we would supply about 1 million photographs in order to explain that, and out of that has come this beautiful little montage to sort of remind me of some of the work that we've done. And all of these photographs actually have been taken since COVID as well. So just to give you a little bit of background of what we do at the museum, we tell everyday stories really about everyday life through time and through immersive experiences all the way from the 1820s right through to the 1950s. And we always put the visitor first. That's what we say. But how can you put the visitor first and give your visitors an absolutely fabulous experience without looking after yourself as well? So that is something that we as an organisation always strive to do. In order to make sure that we are this happy, friendly, welcoming place, we need to make sure that we look after our volunteers. So within that, we've had a number of initiatives over the last few months really. Just to give you an idea of our volunteer makeup, we span really from age 8 all the way through to around about sort of late 90s, and some of our volunteers have been with us for a very long time, some 50 years, which is the age of the organisation itself. So we do retain our volunteers, which is a fabulous thing. There's loads of different ways that you can get involved with the museum, and Wendy and I especially are passionate about making sure that working and volunteering with us is an experience within itself. So there's loads of things that you can do and get involved in, and that's why these pictures show a couple of those things. So you can see our CEO, Priyan, just in the bottom there. That was one of our first socially distanced catch-ups and coffee mornings that happened during one of our sort of weird, half-open, half-closed periods after COVID. You can see Les there, he's been volunteering with us 50 years, and we gave him a little certificate to commemorate that anniversary as well. We've got our brass band, that's a voluntary band just in the corner. We've also got a choir, haven't we, Wendy? And we've got a wonderful youth group that do all sorts of different things. Now, one of the important things to always consider with your volunteers is they have a plethora of different skills, experience, life experience. I did the AIM leadership program in 2017, and one of the things that really stuck with me, amongst many other things, but we talked about square-shaped roles and jelly-shaped people. And it's that jelly that really kind of interests me, because we have these sort of role descriptions, even with volunteer role descriptions, and there is this extra. There is something, there's a skill or a talent or a passion. It's the things that make your heart sing. And I think over the last few years, we sort of began to forget what makes our heart sing, haven't we? So Wendy and I started to think about this, and we decided that we would initiate skill sharing. It's done completely on a voluntary basis. And you can see me just in the top corner there, boxing with one of my colleagues, Johnny, who works in the town. And what's been brilliant about this is that it's brought together people that wouldn't ordinarily have the opportunity to socialise and to share stories and so forth. So all of these skill shares are done, as I say, on a completely voluntary basis. And Wendy, you're probably going to remind me of some of the lists, the reams of things that we've done. So I'll hand quickly to you to go through some of that.
Right. Is that okay? Yeah, brilliant. So we've got some core ones that we've said. So we've got things like the volunteer choir, we've got craft club that we do. So that's like the really basic ones. And then we've got some weird and wonderful ones as well. So we have kickboxing, lunch in the park, we do Nordic walking, 1950s movie nights, basket making, we've got baking on the way as well. Basically, anything that somebody would like to share and do with us. There's lots more that I can't really think of right now. But it is really good, it brings people together.
It's all the stuff that's not in the job description, but it's the stuff that makes your heart sing. And in order to really look after our staff and our volunteers, we've offered them the opportunity to get involved in all of those initiatives. So the happier we are, the happier we can make our visitors too. They are returning. We're so proud that we've welcomed back about 33,000 visitors over half term just gone, and long may that continue. So I'm going to leave it there because everybody else wants to speak. Thank you very much for your time.
Everyone hear me okay? Am I on here now? There we go, magic. So my name's Gareth, I'm from Manchester Jewish Museum. If anyone's not been to Manchester Jewish Museum since we reopened last July, this is our beautiful new museum. We're extremely proud of it. It's been a long time in the making, and it's been a process that has taken us some time, and as well as the building of our new extension, which we're very proud of, which contains our new cafe, new galleries. Do come and visit if you do get the chance. And the renovation of our historic synagogue building. We've also done an enormous amount of work in the last few years on our governance. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of that journey that we've been on in terms of our governance structure. Now, I'm not going to come up here and claim that our trustees are happy all the time. We're not experts at this, but it's a process that we've been through, and I think there are some things that might provoke you to think about the way that you interact with your board. So, in terms of where we were, so 7.5 years ago when I joined the museum, the board was extremely small. Most of the trustees had been with the museum a long time. As a Jewish museum, the board was entirely Jewish, but it didn't truly reflect the diversity of the Jewish communities of Manchester, and it certainly didn't reflect our audiences. At the time, our audiences were about 90% non-Jewish. we were being governed by an entirely Jewish board. Now, we're proud to be a Jewish-led, diverse-led organisation, but we need our board to reflect our audiences as well and the communities that we serve. And what we really were missing was sector-specific knowledge and understanding. Most of the board were members of Manchester's Jewish communities, but they didn't have that understanding of museum or culture or heritage work. In terms of where we are now, one of the reasons that I was invited to speak is because we've been through a significant amount of change. In October, having opened the new building in July, both our chief exec and our chair of trustees decided to move on to other projects. So I took over as interim chief exec, and we brought in one of our trustees became interim chair. And I think had we not done the work that we've done over the last few years, that would have been a really significant risk to the organisation, a really risky time. But the fact that we've done quite a lot of thinking about what to do in this situation, because we'd kind of got our ducks in a row in terms of our governance, it was a much easier process than it would have otherwise been. But we are back to a smaller board again, so we've still got work to do. But we do now have really solid sector-specific knowledge. But where we want to be is we've just undertaken a board diversity review, looking at the kind of skills that we need, hard skills and soft skills and lived experience that we need to bring into the board. So we're just about to announce that we are now recruiting for a significant number of new trustees. So if you'd like to join our board, please do come and have a chat with me at some point. Now, I put here that they're top tips, but they're kind of not really tips. They're just kind of things that you might want to think about, or actually things that I'm inviting you to kind of, for us to think about together. I'll put my email address at the end of this presentation. If you're going through a similar process and you're starting to think about what your board looks like, I think these are things that we should be discussing together. So the first thing, the most important tip I think I would say, is the reason that we've been able to navigate this change so successfully is because of the work we've done on our vision and values, our understanding of what the museum does. 7 years ago when I joined the museum, one of the things I said I wanted to be able to do was get in a taxi after an evening event and answer the question, what are you doing there? That question that we all get, you know, people who don't even know what a museum is, how do you explain what Manchester Jewish Museum is for, what you're doing there? Everybody in the organisation, including the trustees, needs to be able to answer that question in a sentence. Because it might not be a taxi driver, it might be a funder, it might be someone who is the key to opening up a whole new community or audience. And if your trustees and everyone in your organisation can't answer that question, or if they don't necessarily say what you would want them to say, that can be a significant problem. Clarity of role. Do your trustees and staff understand where the divisions of their role lie and what they're there for? I came from much bigger organisations previously. I'd never met a trustee of any of the organisations I'd worked at before. Coming to a smaller independent museum, it was a shock to me how involved the trustees have to be. And as smaller organisations, we need that involvement. But it also means, as a paid member of staff or as a trustee, you need to know where the rules are around what those roles are. And if that lack of clarity is there, it leads to real problems. And then, again, I would say this is probably equal to the first one for me. Prior to taking over as chief exec, I was the head of programmes. So for me, in terms of deciding what to programme, some of the programming that we do might be about challenging subjects. It might be about subjects that will attract some controversy. If there isn't a clear decision-making process, that again will lead to serious problems. So we have a very clear decision-making process for how we decide whether and what we should programme. And so then when controversy arises, you can refer back to that process and you don't get hung out to dry by people saying, well, we didn't know about it, or we don't know why they chose to do that. So that clarity of process has been really important for us. Again, another thing that in terms of the role of a trustee, you hear a lot, one thing that you hear a lot is, oh, that's an operational thing, trustees shouldn't be getting involved in that, trustees should be just strategic. As smaller independent museums, we don't have that luxury. We often need our board to get very involved. But the trustees need to know how involved you need them to be. So you need to be having those conversations with people. And it doesn't have to be the same for every trustee. Our finance trustee is very involved because she comes from the sector, she has the time, and we rely very heavily on her support. Not all trustees want to be that involved, and it isn't necessarily needed for every trustee, but you need to have the conversation. And then in terms of why we've been able to navigate this change successfully, you need to have a plan for what happens. If you get an email now to say that your chair or your chief exec or someone in your leadership team is moving on, you need to know what happens. So we had a succession plan in our risk register. So when this news came about, we were able to put that plan into action. Interestingly, at my first board meeting, the board then said, oh, we can take that off now because we've got you. And obviously, you don't want to say, well, not forever, but that's the reality. You can't. I don't want to go to a board meeting and say, can we put succession planning back on because I'm thinking about going somewhere else. This is another big one. I was really shocked as a new chief exec, as someone who came from a program background, as someone who's been involved in kind of community development. It comes as second nature to just include as many people as possible, get as many voices as possible in the room. I was really shocked to hear that most trustees are chosen by trustees. That people just go out and choose people like them, which then leads to lack of diversity. It means that trustees don't necessarily reflect our audiences. So including staff and audiences and representatives of the communities that we serve in deciding who a trustee is really important. And then an equal focus for us. Yes, you need hard skills. You might need someone who's got a financial background or a legal background, but you don't have to be a solicitor to be a trustee. I don't know if this is just our museum, but solicitors really like being trustees. So you don't have to be from a legal profession to be a trustee. We want local residents, we want people with diverse life history, and we want people with lived experience that helps us better understand the audiences that we serve. And that's me. So as I say, none of that is, I'm sure this kind of work is going on across the country and across the UK, and so if you are involved in this kind of work or if you're starting that process, please do give me a shout. It's something we're really interested in and hopefully we can help each other. Thank you.
Gareth should come and meet our trustees at the National Justice Museum. Can you imagine the solicitors on our board? There's not as many as there were. So, hi everybody. My disclaimer at the beginning of this is that I wasn't writing notes during Laura's speech. My notes were written yesterday, but they're pretty similar. Along the same lines, and I think that probably shows how the lockdown experience has been for CEOs and museums over the last couple of years. So I was asked to talk about how leadership focused on wellbeing and flexibility can change the culture of an organisation. And I think that's off the back of the fact that when I joined the National Justice Museum 4.5 years ago, my main aim was to try and make sure that we knitted everybody together into one team. I think those that are in the audience that work there will remember that it was quite silo working a few years ago. We were trying to make sure that we became one team, which is relatively tricky when geographically you're in Nottingham, London and the North West and in other places across the country. I suppose I should say we've got 80 staff across those locations. We're the national provider of public legal education, and we run the National Justice Museum and the City of Caves in Nottingham, which are two of the key attractions in the city, with historic courtrooms, and a very large collection about the British criminal justice system. I feel like I've just read the introduction to my appeal application with the and in symbols. So got that down to a T, my little paragraph. So my way of going about that was to lead by talking to lots of people, telling them lots of things about myself, which meant that I drew things out about them. And what was really interesting is that within the first couple of weeks of me being there, someone who perhaps I would put in the old guard of the organisation said to me, "Victoria, how are you ever going to lead or discipline these people? You talk to them too much." And I said, well, that's sort of the point, isn't it? That I want to know these people and find out what makes them tick so that we can become one big team. But inevitably, the last couple of years have changed the way we've approached that. And I think actually, rather like Laura was saying this morning, that's opened up a lot of opportunities for the way we work. So I suppose, you know, pre-lockdown, I'd never heard of Zoom. And I remember the first morning, my assistant saying to me, "Oh, there's this thing called Zoom, you can set it up and talk to everybody." And I ended up on the end of my daughter's bed, with an iPhone propped up on her dressing table, with said daughter behind me joining in, rather than doing her schoolwork. And that was how lockdown started, with us all crowded around different Zooms. And actually, that was a learning experience, but it was great because it meant that people from across the country could come together in one place on a Zoom session. And I think what then came out of that was thinking about how during lockdown, while we were all at home, you know, it's that, I just remember that shock of suddenly being at home and thinking, I'm the leader of this organisation, I don't really know what I do next. You know, do I sit here and wait to see what happens? And there's all these people who I know are sat in their homes, not really knowing what to do next either. And so what we started was really regular Zooms with the team. I didn't do a video, so I'm afraid I can't show a video, but I did weekly emails to everybody, and I used those as an opportunity to tell people all the sort of nuts and bolts of what was happening. I was really honest with people about what was happening. I told them if I didn't know something, because inevitably there were lots of questions that I couldn't answer. I was just really honest about that and said, you know, I don't know, I'll tell you as soon as I do. Other things I did, the team set up during that period, which kept everybody involved and happy, was they set up a Facebook staff page, which everybody posted onto. Now, clearly, that's not the first time they've had a Facebook staff page, because I know there's one I'm not invited onto. But there was one that all of us were on, that we still use now. And we did, I know that during lockdown there were lots of regular team meetings on Zoom, and just making sure that everybody still felt really engaged with what we were doing, they knew what was going on. I know that people had coffee mornings and craft afternoons, and all of that sort of came together to keep us all sort of engaged during that sort of weird on-off period of, are we opening the museum, are we not, are we allowed out of our homes, etc. What we also did, which I know we've had some really positive feedback about, is how we used furlough. You know, inevitably there was a period of time during lockdown where I think 97% of our staff were furloughed. At one point there was only myself and our financial controller working, and we asked our trustees whether we could not work, and we were told no. Because it's a little tricky doing the homeschooling and trying to save an organisation. But I think what happened with furlough, particularly when it became flexi furlough, which really helped our staff in the way that they experienced lockdown, was that we were able to flex that to help people. So we knew that there were some people who didn't want to come back to work full time, we knew there were some people who were looking after relatives who were ill, that we were able to flex it to help them. And I think we were just really open with people in the lead up to reopening about the fact that they didn't necessarily have to come back to work straight away. We flexed the way we worked within the museum. We normally do guided tours. Clearly, we didn't want to put staff in a situation where they were particularly doing guided tours of caves with lots of people underground. So we just talked to people. We kept talking to people, getting feedback about how they would like to work. And for instance, the guided tours in the caves are still not back because we're still talking to the staff about how they feel and how comfortable they feel about that return. I think what's also come out of it is the whole thing around hybrid working, which I think really builds on something I tried to instill in everybody when I first arrived, which was just about we don't necessarily all need to be in the same building all the time to be creating a great team and being able to work looking after our organisation. So things I've just quickly written as my reflections were, I think, one of the things which is really easy to let slide is that my weekly email, I promised I would carry on doing once we reopened, and I can't remember the last time I did it, and that's just because life takes over. And I promise those in the audience that work with me that will start going again. Lockdown meant that we could do a lot of our meetings that we would normally be hauling people from Manchester, London, etc. into one place, spending a load of money on transport. It meant we can move all of those management meetings to online, not necessarily all of them, but just making sure that a good proportion of them are, so that everybody can join in and not feel so disparate as an organisation from a geography point of view. The hybrid working stuff, what Laura talked about this morning around trust, that's a really big part of the way I work. I don't, I get really concerned when someone rings me and says, oh, I'm working home today, do you mind if I just nip out for an hour to do X, Y, or Z? And I think, why are you phoning me? I don't understand why you're asking me, because I trust you to be doing your job probably better because you haven't trekked to wherever, because you're at home and you're being more productive. But I think the big key thing about that is making sure that people are happy in that environment of working at home, that your team that are still having to be at work are happy. I'm very aware that there are only parts of the team that we look after that can be in that situation of hybrid working, because clearly you can't work on front of house from home. And then the other thing is around making sure that people have the right environment if they are going to work at home to still feel happy and productive. And so I suppose what I would leave you on is at the beginning of lockdown, not only did I have to balance on the end of my daughter's bed, but we only had one office at home that me and my husband shared, because we basically split the week between us of who was at home on sort of childcare, dog duties, and who was at their office. And of course, he got the office when lockdown started, and I ended up on the kitchen table with the kids. So what in the end happened was I ended up on our landing outside our bedroom, 2 bookcases, and a plank of wood, and my laptop. And it was like that for about the first 6 months of lockdown, because you couldn't buy a desk anywhere. But I think that just shows that we just wanted to make sure that if people are working at home, they've got the right environment to be productive and happy. And that's me.
Hello, I'm Morrigan, and I'm going to tell you about Networking for Resilience, which is a brilliant programme in Wales that I've personally benefited from. It's aimed at museum leaders and the heritage officers in Wales, so that's local authorities, National Trust and independents. It's a whole mix of us, and it's supported by AIM with funding from Welsh Government, and it recognises the fact that there hasn't been anything tailored to that sort of specific group. When it was set up, it was by invitation, which I feel is a really important detail because I felt noticed and I knew it was for me and people like me. I think it also accounts for the really good engagement and positive take-up and ongoing engagement with the group. It includes residential courses, workshops, ad hoc mentoring as and when museum leaders need a bit of a top-up, and fortnightly network meetings. It's been running since 2018 and continued with some adaptations throughout the pandemic. And brilliantly, it's been confirmed by AIM and Welsh Government that it's been supported for a further 2 years, which we're all really delighted about. So first of all, it started with a leaders program, and this has been expanded in the past year to include a rising leaders program too. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how they, what they look like, why why they work so well, and their connectivity. So the AIM programme, the funding has meant that the group is facilitated and organised. So it's not up to us as museum leaders, as individuals, to maintain the network and to coordinate it. So all that strain is taken out of it, so we just have to show up and focus on the activity. It's facilitated, and the facilitator to date has been Nick Winterbottom, who brings his own wealth of experience as a museum leader and in delivering leadership development programmes elsewhere in the UK. And he also invites exciting and interesting people to share their experiences with us to help spark discussions on topics. So it's been really interesting for us as museum leaders, often quite isolated and geographically spread out across Wales, to meet and hear people from outside our geographic sphere. As a network, we really value the space that we're part of. It's a space that's confidential, and it's respectful, and it's nurturing. We're encouraged to share real challenges and explore them together as a group. And there's a mantra we all recite, which we've already heard once today, which is, none of us is as smart as all of us. And it's a great value for us as museum leaders to embed and to take back into our own teams. For the training element of the programme, it's quite a democratic process, so we get to choose what the training programme will focus on. And sometimes, if we want to revisit a theme and look at it again from a different angle, that's absolutely fine. Another really important part of the programme is that many of us especially value is a space to share and to connect. We've recognised across the group some really kind of common experiences of feeling isolated, perhaps not being particularly well supported in our own organisations, and exhaustion by having to be all things to all people because our services are under-resourced. So during the pandemic, lots of us describe feeling a different kind of exhaustion and bewilderment. So while we recognise the network won't solve those issues, we can all feel the benefits of being more resilient. We can find smarter ways through these challenges. And this filters across our teams back at work too. So looking at things from a different perspective and hearing how what you're experiencing resonates with others is actually quite cathartic. It clears the air and it puts us in a different mental space to be able to focus on being creative and strategic leaders. It's not just a load of grumbling and complaining, but there is an element of that, which is kind of quite helpful for us just to release. So during the residentials, for example, we all really benefited from this kind of talk and walk exercise. And we just kind of almost spent the first half day just offloading a load of frustrations that you carry around with you all the time and kind of rock you up. But also now with the fortnightly Zoom meetings, we all start with sharing with the group something positive and something challenging, and then reflecting on any themes that arise from that. And a number of us have replicated that within our own teams too. During the pandemic, the network was incredible. It was a space where we could really consider the awfulness of the situation and be energised by exploring the positives that we can take from it. So we had an opportunity to go right back to the basics and asking ourselves what our purpose is, what kind of leaders we are, and planning for an uncertain future. And the kind of discussions, these are the kind of discussions we very rarely allowed ourselves to have. And it gave us, on the network, the tools to go and have those conversations with our teams to focus on the need for change and the vision that we could generate together. And it was incredibly helpful to be reminded that we shouldn't underestimate fatigue, not just in a pandemic situation. So we often use the analogy of putting an oxygen mask on ourselves first, so that we're in a position to watch and discuss with our team their confidence and their energy levels. And then be able to reciprocate and build the confidence in your team towards your energy levels as well. It's very much sort of what Laura was talking about, that vulnerability. So I'll just touch on briefly the Rising Leaders programme, which is in parallel to this. So while the Museum Leaders programme is a space for us to talk freely and it's a level playing field and there's a lot of common ground, we also recognise that other SMAL teams could benefit from something similar. So the Rising Leaders programme was created in parallel and explores a very similar range of leadership issues at quite a high level, and it's proven really successful. To get a place, it was an application process rather than by invitation, and it's interesting to note how many people struggle to recognise that they are leaders when they're not an organisational figurehead or managing staff. However, speaking with other managers and whose colleagues succeeded in getting a place on the programme, we've really noticed a benefit in their growth of their understanding and their confidence levels. They're often professional specialists in roles such as exhibitions, conservation, education, and being a part of the programme devoted to a broader picture of museum management has also created for them a wider network. And as managers, we've then felt much better supported by our teams because they're better informed, their status has been recognised, and they're possibly less frustrated and feeling more confident, definitely. The top 3 things that I would sort of take from the programme. First, recognising the value of reflective time or headspace, as some of us have described it. It's not a luxury, it's essential. And it takes time to break that habit of lurching from one challenge to the next, but we've experienced the exhaustion and the low resilience that causes, whereas pausing to connect and share really has regenerative and restorative properties. Second, the importance of making connections with others inside and outside our own organisations, especially people who have exciting conversations with. Our network has introduced us to people who spark ideas, and we've got to know each other better, people who we already knew, but we get to see them differently. And finally, I think building trust as the foundation for an effective network. For example, we've set up a WhatsApp group, and it's great, but we just need a bit of encouragement, advice, or a second opinion. And that has come from building trust, and it wouldn't have existed without this programme. Thanks.
I told you they were a great panel. Thanks so much. It's really wonderful to hear how you've created and sustained some really important relationships during difficult times that they're carrying on. And we have a few minutes left now for the roving microphone to head on out among you. So if anyone does have a question, please put your hand up.
I don't think there's one answer to this at all, but I was just wondering, the recent Art Fund survey from directors, oh there we go. Sorry, the recent Art Fund survey from directors said that 57% of them have had staff that have increased mental health issues. And I'm just wondering, is there advice that you have that you might be able to share with us all as we wrestle with that kind of mental health crisis?
Is that working? I think I'd just say that we found it was about being really aware about people's different situations. I suppose just thinking about the return to work after lockdown particularly, there wasn't a sort of one-size-fits-all approach to it, because there were some people who were absolutely raring to get back and be in the building and be really practical. And then there were other people who didn't even want to get on the bus and come in. And so we had to think about, we did things like thinking about the times that people started work and tried to sort of change shift patterns so that people didn't necessarily have to come in rush hour, for instance. We obviously accommodated people carrying on working at home as long as we could. And I think it was just that whole thing of not everybody is going to feel the same about this. And I think it was, for me, it was having to take a step back from that and realise that not everybody was perhaps as resilient as I'd had to be, and therefore we had to sort of act with probably even more empathy than we would have done usually.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to, we've talked quite a lot about vulnerability, haven't we? And I think the fact that we as leaders are prepared to say that, you know, sometimes throughout this process we've not been okay, and that we kind of empower our staff to tell us what they need, and that we're, I think, you know, we pride ourselves on being a flexible organisation that responds quickly to opportunities and threats, and that includes reacting to what our staff need. And one of the things that I've really put front and centre with my team is that, you know, we work in this sector because we want to do good work. We believe in the work that we do, we believe in the change that we make in people's lives, but it's not worth making ourselves sick over. Like, we wouldn't tolerate that for our audiences. If we were doing work that was causing our audiences stress, we would all feel that we were failing. But then there are times when we prioritise the good work that we do, even if it makes us and our staff poorly, which just seems completely counterintuitive to me. So what I say to my staff is that, you know, our team is part of the good work we do. You know, I want to see change in them, our staff and our volunteers. The good impacts that our work has on them are as important as the work that we do with the communities that we serve. And so we have a kind of a zero tolerance for stuff that makes people upset or anxious or stressed. We believe in flexible approaches that mean that people can, as you were saying, you know, take what you need. You know, we trust our team. We have processes in place that mean that we can manage anything that doesn't quite go to plan. But we trust each other to do good work and to take the time that you need to be healthy.
And Celyn and Wendy, I wondered, obviously you're working with volunteers as opposed to staff, and I just wondered if you could say something about the impact of your work with volunteers.
Yeah, since the start of the year we introduced a wellbeing newsletter, and that goes out quarterly, and it talks about all sorts of things from menopause to signposting to local organisations, whether it be the counselling, food banks, all sorts of things as well. We've got mental health first aiders as well at the museum. We've got about 20 plus mental health first aiders. There's a new training scheme that we've done at Cadet 5, which is really, really good as well. Yeah.
I know you're short on time, so I'm not going to add anything more to that.
Any more questions from the floor before I... No? Well, thanks very much everybody for participating today. That brings us to the end of day one.